Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the TF podcast, where we talk about technology and finance, and that typically revolves around Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and blockchain. Please make sure that you are following us across our podcast channels as well as on YouTube. And I am at JG Product on Twitter. With that, I'd love to welcome Cal Evans, one of the top legal professionals in the space when it comes to blockchain crypto. With that, and Bitcoin, of course. So with that, Cal, please introduce yourself.
Hey, morning, John. Morning, guys. My name's Cal. I'm an international lawyer. I specialize in cryptocurrencies and blockchain projects on the fringe. Worked in the space since about 2015. Got involved personally in about 2013. Always honest with people when I say, look, I got in much later than I should have and sold much earlier than I also should have. So yeah, everybody has the Bitcoin question right. But yeah, great to be here. Great to be talking to you, John.
That's why I tell people, don't take financial advice from me, because I buy high and I sell low, but I don't sell anymore. So anyways, well, this is great. Yeah, it's great to chat with you. It's been a while since we've had a chance to talk. Lots of interesting, fun things going on in the world as we see how cryptocurrency is, and more particularly Bitcoin is really making a tear as we approach the halving. But before we get into that, I'd love if you could touch real quick, just kind of how you got into the space overall as a legal professional. I imagine that that trajectory is slightly different, right? Because, I can't imagine it was in vogue to be a crypto lawyer, when you started.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it definitely wasn't. So I went through a real interesting personal time. Lots of stuff changed, and I ended back up in the UK, and I needed to work for myself. My mum wasn't very well, various other stuff was happening, so I needed some good flexibility. And I decided I was going to set up my own firm. Awesome. I'm going out on my own. I was living with my parents again, and I thought now is the time to go for it. So I knew what crypto was. I really enjoyed it, but I loved startups. And I was like, I'm going to be a startup lawyer. I'm going to help startups. And I took a billing rate card. You have a rate card, right? You
Sure.
charge what you charge. And my rate card reflected a startup lawyer helping startups. So I never like to use the expression whoring myself out, but back when I started up, I mean,
Yeah.
whoring myself
Hey, the best of us have done that, so no worries.
Exactly, right? So, and I'm never ashamed to admit that.
Yeah.
And I was doing everything I could get my hands on, contracts for $400 or whatever. And I ended up, I remember my first month when I was like, yes, I can pay my rent, which was, really just kind of going to my dad.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is awesome. And then I had a project contact me, and the project was like, look, I'm thinking of doing an ICO, and you can file a trademark for us. And I was like, right, stop everything. Tell me about this ICO. And it was a company, a guy called Alexi reached out. He's like, I've got these great ideas. I want to talk to you about this fundraise. Everybody's doing it. And this was back in 2016, kind of early 2016. I was like, this is awesome. And learn all about it, delve into it. And Alexi still is the manager and founder of Everett, a company called Everex, and they did one of the kind of earliest ICOs. And I did some of the legal work on that. And so consequently got my name on the website, did a bunch of stuff, and the ICO did really well. And I took some tokens instead of taking payment, again, pouring myself out. But it was great, and it did really well, and it was a great learning experience. And I walked away from the end of it. I said, you know what? This is all I want to be doing.
Yeah.
And I remembered sitting down with my dad one evening, probably drinking a bottle of scotch, as we frequently did back then, and just said, look, Dad, I love this crypto thing, and I want to get into crypto. And my dad's response was, son, you're an idiot. Like, nobody, this is going nowhere. Like, it's a fad, you're going nowhere. And I was like, no, I think it's going somewhere. So I genuinely, no word of a lie, sat up that weekend, changed my website, edited everything, set it all crypto. And that was it. And then because of the work I did with Everex, people would look at it, see me on the website, reach out, and then the industry kind of took off. And it was a little bit of right place, right time with a good gamble.
Yeah.
So I ended up in it because of personal situations, and my personal situations kind of reflected a lot of what crypto is, right? I needed to be able to send money internationally. I needed to be able to have the flexibility to kind of store value in something that wasn't in my bank account. And it really gave me a personal freedom. So it all married together. Twinning that with the fact, John, that I can't remember if you know this about me, but I'm a not secret geek. I video game. I mean, I got my gaming rig behind me. Like I programmed at one point. So I loved the whole, and
Boy.
honestly, that was how I ended up in it.
Yeah. Awesome. That's cool. Just because you, have experience on the legal framework, revolving the ICOs, like, obviously that was, for lack of a better way to explain it, was volatile in the sense of like how people had thought about that, right? And like a lot of these ICOs have lost a lot of their value, and just kind of curious of like from what you know then to what you know now, just what's kind of your overall opinion on, I guess, just even ICOs or IEOs or doing those type of fundraising mechanisms, in regards to how we have more legal context around it now.
So yeah, that's a really good question. There's my personal feelings around it, and there's professional feelings, right? As there is
Yeah.
with everything. My personal feelings are that ICOs are not dead; they have just become more complex. And by that I mean people now don't think it's like so in America, Americans have the expression snake oil, right? You're selling
Yeah.
snake oil. I would say back in 2017, it was selling snake oil. It was,
Yeah.
I have an idea for phone, give me $1 million. If it works, we all get rich. If it doesn't, so what? So what was happening was the mentality was wrong, but the idea was right. Crowdfunding with minimal risks to everybody and minimal regulation / oversight is a really awesome thing, because what did come out of that was projects that otherwise wouldn't have got funded, or the owners would have lost their controlling stake, actually managed to do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I take, for example, a company that we worked with that produced VR headsets. They now use those to help train doctors, to organize, all these kind of really cool, beneficial things. But the owner kept 100% of their company, which was amazing, because you and I both know, you roll into a VC's office, the VC wants 50, 60% for $500,000. And the whole problem is that the money stays with the money.
Mm-hmm.
So projects manage to get funded. In a legal sense, I understand the risks and problems. I get it. People may get too drawn in. There may not be the correct information. There may be some serious problems. And there is a risk. And so people didn't understand that risk reward matrix.
Yeah.
So as long as people get it, and as long as the information is out there, it's okay. And part of what I pushed for when I worked with the UK government was to get a real oversight piece with all of this. And that oversight piece came down to basically, look, letting companies do it, but make sure the money laundering thing goes away, because that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
So they did. And now what we have is, in the UK as an example, and there's other places that do this, apart from Estonia, because I'm going to be honest with you, I think the Estonia license is kind of bullshit. But the UK now has a fully regulated FCA license. So you can be a utility crypto company that's fully regulated by the FCA in the City of London, which is fantastic. So it's like you're saying, look, it's a totally new asset class. And I think that's what had to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, right, it's it's putting some if this is a bowling lane, it's like putting the bumper rails along it, right? It's like, hey, like we just need to make sure that the ball doesn't fall in the gutter.
Great analogy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, look, because there's always that one idiot that's going to turn around and like throw the ball in between his legs.
Sure.
And
sure.
that happened everywhere. We saw that all through 2017, 2016, 2017. That's all that was.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting because like, my opinions have definitely changed on that. Kind of throughout, like I've, where I was a little bit more bullish towards it. Now I'm a little bit less bullish, to be honest, on it, or I shouldn't say bullish isn't the right word, but like, it's less of my jam. How about that?
It's not my particular brand of vodka.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Not my
all right.
cup of how about this? Not my cup of
Not
tea.
my cup of tea. There you go. So, yeah, it's not that. Is it? That's where this came
Yeah,
from.
but I do find the aspect of like in-network tokenization very interesting to me. Like when we start thinking about companies or brands or banks even having their own type of cryptocurrency. I do think like the fact of like having it be like have some association to a secondary market is slightly problematic, but the fact that like someone might want to have like a point or a token or a cryptocurrency within that's used for utility, I feel like that makes a ton of sense because my background is in retail technology, and
Sure.
so
Yeah.
it's like it's just like a loyalty point, right? So
Yep.
no, it's really interesting. Definitely love getting your take on that overall. um, when you think about what's happening right now, just in the overall broader markets, obviously there's a global pandemic going on, and that has dramatically affected the economy, globally. But we're seeing like really interesting things happening in financial markets where like, stocks are kind of going up and down, but for the most part, they're relatively back going in this positive direction. And then same with cryptocurrency. So, I'd love your take on that from like on the business side, but then also I'm really curious on your take on it from like what are we missing from like the legal framework and stuff. Like, is everybody playing within the rules? And to start, I'd love to just kind of go on this the traditional finance side,
Yeah.
and then we can get into the crypto. But I think about things like, at least in the U.S., there's the recent airline bailout, and
Yeah.
like they're like not they're being it's kind of known now that they're not using those funds, for example, to go towards the employees or some of these things that they said they were going to, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
people are still getting charged baggage fees.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's
Still,
like
I'm mind blown. I'm just, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Um,
what are we missing there?
seriously, right? I mean, this whole, first of all, everybody knows we are in an unprecedented economic time. It's
Yeah,
a cliff. There's no gradualization here. This is a cliff. A record number of Americans are unemployed. And the bigger picture is if people are unemployed, people cannot pay their bills, mortgage companies will not lend, banking institutional lending forms anything up to 65% of most major banks, which means that they are going to lose liquidity. This is all showing us that somewhere along the way, something has gone drastically wrong. And I'm a capitalist. I don't care what anybody's personal economic preferences are. I'm a capitalist. I believe it works. But in
hmm,
order for capitalism to work, companies have to fail. The concept of a safety net doesn't exist in capitalism. So if your business model doesn't account for a safety factor, that's your problem, right?
yeah, yeah,
And it's messed up. The fact that companies can take $10 million of bailout money and then pay their CEOs millions of dollars is categorically messed up. And that's where your point kind of overlaps. And I'll bring it back into the crypto sphere in a second, but
yeah,
it really kind of, it's all economics, so it matters. Like your point of, companies, I'm still going to charge you for baggage and this. We've seen the greed for so long, Like companies helping people is gone, and we have to really monitor that, because when we lose sight of the ability for a company to fail, they get complacent,
yeah.
which is how the banks screwed us over in the first place. So the reason I'm going on about this is because Bitcoin partly came out of the first crash, the last crash that we all saw.
Right,
We all know how bad that was. The reason that was so bad, and the reason this situation echoes it, is because none of those businesses have learned their lesson.
right.
If they can go to the government and go, help me, I'm in trouble, it's no different from being a teenager going to dad and being
Yeah,
like, I made mistakes and I need help. If those companies fail and they know they can fail, their whole business model changes.
totally,
It's like
totally.
a teenager, right? It's like your teenager knows that they can spend that last $15 because they're just going to go to dad and be like, Dad, I need $20. The business model changes, and that's where crypto and blockchain comes into it. If you add accountability into organizations by running out what you can on blockchain, we know where that is, right? We know how that technology works, and we know that the transparency that can give. And companies don't want to be transparent. Like
Right,
they just don't. And crypto represents everything the other side of that.
yeah.
You know. Um,
Yeah,
So
you were talking about like that you're a gamer, right? It's like playing a video game and just knowing that you're never gonna die
exactly,
in the
exactly,
game, right? So it's like I have
exactly. I mean, like,
infinite lives.
let's compare Call of Duty to the real world, right?
Yeah,
Call of Duty, I'm going to run in, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to kill 5 guys in that room. You and I both know, like in the real world, you're not
yeah.
doing it because,
Well,
well,
yeah, and it's interesting because like to tie it back to business, when you think about how startups, it's been really neat for me to see a lot of startups kind of just like thrive and work hard, and they're not getting the payroll protection because they're not qualifying for it, or it ran out or whatever, and it's like they're operating on basically just working their tails off, and it's like, yeah, I don't understand how that doesn't echo all the way up. So it seems as though, obviously, if you're one of these companies, you probably have a very strong legal team, and my guess is that they're playing within the rules. They're just they know how to bend the rules to work with what they need, right?
yeah, yeah. It's, look, from a legal perspective, it's a very complex situation because you have something. So if we take America as a sideline and then we look at the rest of the world, America has a lot of lobbying. America's politicians are effectively paid for,
Yeah.
and that's a real situation that occurs here. Everything down from your local sheriff right up to your state senator, they're paid for, and that gives leverage over a politician, which in a pure capitalist market can have a healthy impact because it's people lobbying in the best kind of way, in a backwards kind of way. But like from a legal perspective, you have to take into account the fact that this money is coming down from a government that is just printing money,
Mm-hmm.
and legally all of that is okay. Legally, the federal government has the power to do it, the UK government has the power to do it, it's all okay. But then there comes to this real crunch time question of, okay, if we can just print money, why do we have taxes? If I can just make more of it, why am I taxing it? And I had a really interesting debate, and just pausing everything for a second to think
Yeah.
of this, right?
No, it's an interesting way to think. Yeah. Why do we pay taxes?
Seriously, the two things that are happening at the minute is the government is printing money and you are confined to your home. Now, the two things that happen if you are a criminal is that your civil liberties are restricted and your financial ability is also hindered. So this comes down to the question of, why are we paying taxes and why are we sticking by the laws? Because if I break the law, I get locked away and I have my civil liberties restricted. Well, up until last weekend, we here in Southern California couldn't go to the beach. We had restrictions on leaving our home. So we were quasi under house arrest.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the government's printing money, why are we paying taxes? So this brings us on to a much broader, in theory, question of why are we paying taxes and why are we sticking by the law? Now, common decency and moral says that we've got to do that. So that's okay. We're not all going to go out and do it. But if we home in on the economics, this is why a lot of the digital dollar stuff was put in the stimulus package, because the American government and every government knows that there's an element of the control that's being left here, that's being let go because they have to.
Yeah.
And the digidollar, which you kind of briefly spoke about earlier, the
Yeah.
digidollar is almost like a way to wipe the slate clean. So what you might see happening in the future is the digidollar becomes the more powerful unit of currency because it's regulated and it's maintained, and the paper dollar actually becomes worthless because of quantitative easing and all this other stuff.
Oh, got it. So kind of what you're coming from is that not necessarily like that they're one and the same, but perhaps they're two different mediums of exchange.
Yeah. So look at China. China's done some absolutely out there things with their digital currency. And the reason why I kind of got dragged into that big social economic side of things is because China's linking their digital currency to a social economical impact. If you do good deeds and good things, you get more digital money. If you do bad things and bad deeds, you get less digital money. So, okay, I get it. China's a very different model and a very different mechanism, but everything's intertwined.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything that happens on the stock market, everything that happens social economically, it's intertwined. And legally, we have to be champions of that. We have to, because there'll come a time where there has come a time where the rule of law isn't questioned, but it has to be flexible, because everything we discourage people with and we entice people with, the status quo of that has totally changed.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to really be flexible with all of that.
Totally. So since we're going down this path on the digital dollar side, I'd love to talk about the privacy and security that comes or is or maybe even taken away as a result of that. Right. So, it's funny how cryptocurrency is often used as like this, or spoken of as a tool for nefarious activity, when like the actual physical cash is the most nefarious transactional method on the
Yeah.
planet.
Yep.
And so with the digital currency, presumably there's going to be lots of monitoring and tracking and issues of that, right? Like in China, as you were mentioning, the digital currency is going to be tied to digital identity. It's not necessarily known if that's going to be the case here, but what are the privacy concerns that people should have when it comes to thinking about what a digital dollar might be? And then, does that mean that we're essentially every single payment that we make throughout is tracked, from now on? And you can argue that like that currently happens with, Visa or MasterCard or whatever you're doing from that standpoint. But
Yeah.
obviously this is a layer deep. And then we're talking about kind of, blockchain or using these technologies that have this record management function, for this type of activity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a digital dollar, any digital currency actually impacts the government more than it impacts ordinary people. So I've always said, look, if you're not a criminal, you've got nothing to hide.
Right.
And that's kind of genuine, right? People, you watch programs like CSI and all these other things, and it's like, oh, we found he has a bank account in the Cayman Islands, and oh, we found, all of these transactions. And that's when there's an underlying theme there. That's when they're looking at the bad guy. So like John, I don't know about you, but I really couldn't care less if anybody wanted to go through my banking history. I mean, to be honest, they'd probably be kind of depressed, and question why I spend so much money on just so much junk. Like, that's the reality of it. And it's true what you say. Wherever there's money, wherever there's a medium of transaction, there's going to be bad guys. Like there's going to be, and you see that. It doesn't matter whether it's gold bullion, cocaine, dollar notes. It all has its downfall. And Bitcoin got really singled out. Like, it got really singled out because it does have, to a degree, an added layer of privacy. And now that the governments have worked out, most governments, have worked out that you can remove that layer of privacy or control it, that's where their big debate comes from. Like, do we maintain, like you say, a kind of level of anonymity where citizens have got the right to use it as they want, but on this other hand, we can delve down into it. Mm-hmm. And this brings in like a really big kind of heavy layer stuff legally of your rights, your constitutional rights.
Right.
How much can you dig into my transactions? Because here's the messed up thing, and I spoke about this so many times. If we take Visa, if we take MasterCard, various other companies, they're private organizations that handle our cash.
Yeah.
And we know, like you and I know, and most of your listeners know, that the big incentive of cryptocurrency is it is decentralized. So you kill the banks and you kill card payment processors and all these wonderful things. But the reason that's a good thing is if we think back to 2018, early 2019, card providers stopped you from buying cryptocurrency with your credit or debit card. And that's your money. A private company literally said, listen, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And that's so wrong on so many levels. And that's the big fear with a digital currency. That digital currency is going to go away from the not the traditional banking model, because that can't collapse, because the US government cannot afford for banks to collapse, card providers to stop trading. Like, it's just not going to happen. So the digital currency is going to get integrated into that network.
Sure. But
then they'll keep that level of maintenance and control because they don't want that anonymity. That's their biggest fear. And the government, like when they work out cryptocurrencies, digital money removes quantitative easing. So their trade-off for that is they cannot, quantitative easing goes, all of these other things go, all of the economic models that are kind of dangerous die, but they get control. And the big question is this, look, is the digital dollar going to be successful? The answer is yes, because we are moving into a cashless society, like factually. Money will be digital. There is no need for us to walk around with paper in our pockets. It's kind of insane. But having said that, I don't think, prediction time, I don't think the digital dollar is going to be alone. The US government is going to have to accept that cryptocurrencies are here to stay, factually. And they've got it now. It's been rammed down their throat, but here to stay as a medium of exchange. Like I can pay for stuff with it. So will there be money laundering? Will there be whatever? I mean, listen, you and I both know, right? You've seen enough heist movies to know. Like when designers build a better safe, all you get is a better class of criminal.
Right.
And that's all that's going to happen here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely an interesting point of view. And, just to touch on what you're talking about, like, hey, like, you don't mind, or you have nothing to hide. And I definitely get that sentiment. And though I agree, what's interesting, I think, about all this is, and what we've learned in the, call it the internet revolution, and particularly like around ads, right? And cookies, and like, we all have these digital personas of us online that we may or may not be aware of, but we do. And that's how you get retargeted, or, a lot of segmentation data on yourself, right? So Facebook ads is one of the most amazing, and when I say amazing, I don't necessarily mean that in a good way, but it's one of the most amazing machines at understanding segmentation data, right? So like marketers can find the right people, everything from like location, interest, everything, because you volunteer all that information on Facebook, right?
You don't even know you're doing it. That's the messed up thing.
Right. And so, I guess for me, what's though I totally understand that we will have a digital dollar, like, you can't fight that. It's, and though I don't feel like I have anything to hide per se, it's like, I don't want my information to be used against me. Right. Like, or if, or I want to participate in it. I think that's actually one of the things that got me interested in crypto originally, was like kind of like that whole of participation in how, your data is consumed, or like the opportunity for that. I don't think anybody's really doing that well yet. A lot of people are saying that they want to do that and have for years, but anyways, I think it'll be really interesting to kind of think about that overall, because if in turn, because we've seen over time that the fatigue to privacy grows greater and greater and greater, and we allow more and more of our privacy to be available, to where, like, I'm assuming if we went back in time and we're like, hey, did you know like this and this is going to be public, we'll be like, what are you talking about, right? And so each thing becomes a little bit easier. So it'll be really interesting to see how that all plays out, because that's, for me, again, the one thing is, I just don't want my data to then be used as a decision-making mechanism, against me,
exactly,
positive or negative for that matter, right? Like from how I interact in transactions on a daily basis,
Yeah, exactly. It's super interesting you say that, because I worked on the original Facebook model when they first began designing their digital currency. It had a different name. It was very different stuff, but it was all very, very, very quiet. They worked out real quickly that you have to integrate the existing financial world. You have to. I mean, that's why they have MasterCard and all these other companies in there. And you're right. But Facebook have now worked out to a degree that they cannot just keep taking people's data for free. They just can't. And it's interesting because I've worked with a couple of startups that have played in this space, and one startup in particular has patented some various things. And within weeks, Facebook is on their doorstep. Like, hey, we'd love to enter into talks with you. Let's talk more about your technology. Because a lot of what Facebook does, as you have rightly said, is totally unaccounted for. I mean, Facebook's entire business model is predicated around, we take your money, we market it, we kind of give you some feedback, but we're not going to tell you the algorithm in the middle. Like, you don't really know where this is going. And it's like, so this is a statistic that 75 cents of every dollar in marketing is wasted because it goes to the wrong person.
Yeah.
And yes, one benefit of that crypto you can flip and you can say, look, one benefit of a digital crypto is the more it does, the more it's targeted, the more it works better, the more better information you get. But it's right. Like you say, you have to sacrifice your personal data, which
Yeah.
you never want on a government level, right?
No, no.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, that's awesome. I didn't realize that you had spent time, working on that. I've been pretty vocal about, I think that, I've said this actually since they did it. I think Facebook just went about it the wrong way in how they presented what they were doing.
Oh, yeah.
And it was too grandiose, too big. It was like too revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
Like, all they had to do, and I said this even from the beginning, is all they had to do is say, hey, we really like our customers and we like our users, and we realize that they exchange information with each other all the time, and they might want to interact with each other, so we simply just want to reward them for the actions that they take in the system, and we're going to provide a loyalty point for them inside of Facebook. If they just would have said that, like, we would have
Everybody
Libra
would
right
have
now.
understood.
Yeah,
Everybody
we'd have Libra right now.
Yeah,
right?
seriously.
And
And
so
the comedy of it is, I shared a lot of that sentiment. In fact, all of that sentiment. I shared all that sentiment, but I didn't word it as politically well as you did. And that's why, as you can tell, I'm no longer a part of the Libra project. But when it was early on and very early days, I mean, my premonition sitting around that early table when they had a lot, and I mean, they had huge names
yeah.
in that room, even just in my segment, because they segmented everybody. So you couldn't really work out what was going on, but you had to be a bit of an idiot to work out what was going on.
Yeah.
And they segmented people, even in my room, was big names. And they didn't, the higher up the chain you got, nobody understood it. The lower down the chain you got, nobody really wanted it. And you had this weird group of people in the middle who were like, well, maybe we will, maybe we won't. Why should we do this?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, I made a premonition a long time ago, and I'll even show you the messages that we sent. Some of those bigger names that were in that group, and I won't name them, but some of the bigger companies that were in that group, my feeling was they were spying. They just wanted the information to thanks very much and leave.
Yeah.
And consequently, they said thanks very much and left.
Yeah.
So yeah, the writing was on the wall for that pretty early on.
Totally. Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like if you kind of frame something in the realm of like, hey, we're creating this to obfuscate you later. Yeah, just things like that. Just again, I think they could have done all those things and done it in a Trojan horse type of way, had they wanted to. But yeah, it's just.
Oh, I agree.
Loyalty, and it's what makes sense in commerce, anyway, right? Like every commerce company has some concept of loyalty and retention, cash back, whatever.
But that comes down to a really good point of what we said a few minutes ago. China invoking it. If a company like Facebook can issue their own digital currency and reward me for what I'm doing, why in theory couldn't the government? Like, if I'm a good person, if I have my good deeds, and I get it's the pinnacle of, we have this expression in the UK, the nanny state, like, you're being looked after. It's the pinnacle of the nanny state. You're physically being rewarded for being a good little boy or girl or whatever you choose to identify as.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, but kind of should they? Like, I get up every morning, I go to work, I pay my bills on time, I pay my taxes. And why shouldn't I be rewarded for that?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a whole massive counter argument. And that's why people in China have said yes. People in China have said, yes, you know what? I should be rewarded for that. I'm a good party member. I'm a good citizen of China. I don't badmouth the leadership. And they should be rewarded. And it'd be really interesting to see if there is this like shift in the US as we get more comfortable with, Facebook are rewarding me and I'm getting something. Government, I pay my taxes on time.
That's so interesting. I've never thought about that from a government level. And then, when you're saying that, I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then my mind started going, like, wait a second. But then what happens when you have like different, political parties in power? Like, do you get more points as a result of like supporting party affiliation and things like that? Really interesting things to think about how that plays out. Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to make sure that we talk about is, going back to like the Bitcoin and what's happening, and there's so much attention right now going towards the Bitcoin halving. There's a lot of really interesting, awesome companies that are just doing really great things in the space. Bitcoin's doing a run up right now, and so it feels exciting like in 2017 right now,
Yeah.
even though we're like in this crazy time globally. What are we missing from a legal context? Like, back in 2017, like things were so exciting and people weren't paying attention to certain laws, or they were, call it maybe like wishfully avoiding certain things.
Yeah.
What is there, are people doing that right now in a different context? Or like, what are some of the things that people might not be paying attention to, that are either starting these companies, or, retail investors on the sidelines, or what's missing?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from 2017 to where we are, things have got a lot more institutionalized.
Mm-hmm.
There's EFTs, there's more advanced trading, and it blows my mind. What we're missing from a legal perspective in the United States and anywhere in the world, we still do not have a solid legal framework. We don't. Nobody's branched out and categorized what Bitcoin is or it isn't. I mean, it just doesn't exist. And so people don't know, for example, some states let you pay your taxes in Bitcoin. Some states want to tax you on Bitcoin as an income. Other states want to tax you on Bitcoin as, some kind of commodity. And so you either end up paying capital gains tax, personal income tax. Nobody's at a taxation level worked it out. And nobody knows, no one knows what it is. Like nobody knows how to do it. And laws can only be reactive. You can never make a proactive law. You can never legislate against something in case it happens. Something has to happen, and then you have to decide you don't like it, and a law has to be made against it. And all of that is fluid, and people forget that. Like when I talk to other lawyers or people in this industry, and I point out, in my father's generation, the concept of smoking weed on the street with a permit or doing it legally was phenomenal. Like it was mind blowing. It was not going to happen. But there has been a shift, and it is now legal to do that. And so the same thing's going to happen with Bitcoin. So what are we missing? We're missing real tangibility, like actual laws that tell people what it is and it isn't. Because if the government or whomever came out and said, look, this is legal tender, then all of those card companies would stop giving you trouble. Most people cannot get bank accounts. I mean,
Yeah.
I heard the CEO of Coinbase, and I don't know how true this is, but it came from a pretty reliable source. CEO of Coinbase cannot get a bank account. And so now it's not, we have a massive problem with the unbanked globally, which is huge, which this solves. I mean, this solves so many problems. And nobody wants to legislate and make it easier to solve the challenges, right? But then on the other hand, you've got people in the US can't get a bank account, or like can't use their bank account for it. So we are missing real tangible laws. And that's why I lobby. Like I lobby so much. And I encourage everybody, like we've got to, as a community, grow up. And I've said that for a very long time. We can't just be this. We started as a libertarian idealism of free to flowing currency and everything that came along with that. And that's fantastic. But now we've got to grow up, and we've got to get into the mindset of lobbying people, lobbying politicians, lobbying individuals, showing them the power of this. Because the trouble is, if the US government leads the way with this, we'll get their expectation of it. We'll get their model of it.
Yeah.
And from a legal perspective, that's the only one we can get. Because changing things, and I spoke about this years ago, but we're changing things from the bottom up. Like you and I both know, 3 years ago, every major bank, every major government would have loved it if this disappeared.
Yeah, definitely.
And they cited Silk Road, they cited money laundering, they cited everything. But now I can't even talk to you about local laws. I could talk to you about what Wyoming's done. I could talk to you about what Colorado's done. I mean, I met with the governor of Colorado when I was out there for ETHCon. It's amazing, but it's baby steps.
Right.
And this is, dude, this is moving so much faster than that. I mean, we all know that.
Yeah, it sounds like really what you're saying there is that there's just way too much gray area, right? Like there's
Yeah,
just so much gray area that, like, sure, there's some, um call it precedent, or some levels of uh ways to base your decisions off of, but for them, like what you're saying is, some of these more larger banks that might be more risk averse, won't make a decision on it because there's not like a clear decision just yet, overall, like
exactly.
universal across the states in this
Exactly.
context.
Exactly. And I mean, the real kicker of this is, look, when, for example, the SEC has investigated some of our clients for doing an ICO. Now, I have never viewed an ICO as an illegal activity. Yes, there has been some unethical behavior, there has been some bad behavior, but companies like that, I mean, they to a degree stuck out like a sore thumb. And we had the SEC create a fake website. It was a fake ICO. Like, look at this, look at what it is. I mean, they had no idea how to manage this. And whenever I've spoken to them in investigations that have happened with our clients, especially ones that aren't based in the United States, where the SEC have randomly got involved, I mean, my first question's been this: show me a piece of US legislation which features the word cryptocurrency or features the word digital token or digital asset, and we'll keep talking, because that provocates that my client or anybody has done something illegal. And here is the biggest catch 22. Okay. I'm going to give you some inside legal knowledge. Like, how do you get, to a degree, massive disclaimer, I can't guarantee this works. This isn't free legal advice. This is Cal just talking to you, right? But how do you get the SEC off your back if you've done an ICO, right? If you're in the US, you've done an ICO, and you want to do an ICO, and you're concerned about the SEC being on your back.
And this is assuming that you've done things within, like, the framework of the law. You're not a
Exactly.
bad actor.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
haven't gone nuts. You've just done a good old fashioned ICO, but I'm here based in the US, right? Pay tax on it.
Right.
Take the money you raised, treat it as an income or a capital gain, and pay tax on it. And then what happens is the SEC phones you up and says, hey, we think you illegally sold a security. Well, actually, I didn't, because it's not a security for XYZ reason. It's a Howey test, blah, 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 blah. Yes, there's various case law on that, but for the most part, ICOs don't cross the threshold if they're done in a very specific way. And so the first conversation with the SEC goes, fantastic. When is an IRS officer going to phone us up, or an IRS agent going to phone us up and give us our tax back, or give our client our tax back? Because under the US Constitution, it's illegal for the US government to tax illegal activity, because otherwise you justify it. You can't tax being a drug dealer, because otherwise it's illegal activity. So we need our money back. You're telling us what we did was illegal. We need our money back. And I can guarantee you the IRS is not going to give you any money back.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious if anybody's tried that.
Yeah, we did. We actually genuinely, we did. We took a company. In fact, the specific company is in the state below where you are. Yeah, below where you are. They did a raise back in 2017. US company, US people did a raise. They paid tax on it. I will be honest with you, we weren't part of the raise, and we weren't part of paying tax. We worked with them after, and then they started getting the information requests, all of this stuff. And that was it. The phone conversation with this particular regulatory body when, well, listen, I see my clients pay tax, and if you're telling me that's an illegal activity, my client's going to need a tax refund. So do you want to organize speaking with them about it, or shall we? And what are you going to do? I mean, this particular tax payment was a significant chunk of change.
Yeah.
And so the client treated it as selling a commodity. It's been treated as a commodity. They've paid tax on it. It's clearly not a security. It's just no different from buying points with my airline. Walk me through that. And in this particular instance, it was left alone because, yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Is there secondary market activity on that?
Yeah.
But that, I guess, technically has nothing to do with them, right? Because if they're secondary market, they don't have. Interesting.
Exactly. Well, so the US, they do try saying, the SEC does try saying that under the US code, you have, under the securities code, you have responsibility for the perpetual life of that token. Like anything you create that's a security, it's your responsibility to deal with it. However, as I pointed out, companies rely on third parties all the time. For example, if you are a publicly traded company, Token Forum is publicly traded, you wouldn't do your own taxes. You wouldn't audit your own books. You wouldn't onboard your own shareholders. A broker would deal with all that for you. And so if that broker then turned out to be unlicensed, you wouldn't go after Token Forum for using an unlicensed broker. You go after the broker. Mm-hmm. So if you're saying, hey, you sold an unregistered security, actually it's not a security. If those guys are selling a security, go talk to them. Yeah. And so that's where, again, it's a gray area. I mean, you and I both know they could lobby and sit down and write a law. This is this, this is this, this is this, and it hasn't happened.
It would make it easier, right? Yeah, that makes sense. Crazy.
Yeah.
Man, well, Cal, this has been a great conversation. One question I want to leave you with, it's a question I ask everybody at the end of the podcast is, what is a question that you have that you would like to ask our listeners, our audience, as they go about their day, something they can be thinking about?
Oh, good one. I like that. If you had a magic lamp and Genie came out, it was kind of lame, and only gave you one wish, not three. And that wish could only be to do with crypto. We'll call it the crypto genie, right? You rub the crypto lamp, the lame crypto genies come out, and you have one wish in the crypto universe. What would that wish be? Like you could have anything. I want Bitcoin to go to $25,000. I want a stable card system that's going to let me facilitate transactions in every store I go to. Like you get one wish. What would be your one wish or one thing you could do right now in the crypto industry? What would you have?
I like it. I dig it. Awesome, Cal. Thanks so much. What are some ways that people can stay in touch with you?
You can check out our company website, greshaminternational.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can feel free to shoot me an email. I'm kind of old school. It's just cevans, CEVANS @greshaminternational.com. Shoot me a message. I love to talk, shoot some ideas. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much, Cal.
Hey, thank you.
Everybody, thank you again for listening to another episode of the TF podcast. Please make sure that you're subscribed across our channels. And, if you enjoyed this show and our other shows, please do us a favor and fill in those stars. It goes a long way. And share our podcast with your friends and colleagues.
It's something I've always wanted to do. Can I do it?
Do it.
Guys, hit the subscribe button.
Yeah, the subscribe. I think it's going to be on the other side.
Wait, where's it going to be?
It's going to be somewhere over there. Yeah.
Hit the subscribe button, guys. Just hit it.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. We'll see you all later.
Thanks, guys.